Well, so the value of the EU element of European identity. And, you know, the first question we could wonder, and I guess I'm sorry I could not join you during the day because I was in my office in Italy, but maybe you'd already talk about it. Why do we need value? Why we need to define value? And as a lawyer, I would say, well, that's easy. That's easy because if I look in the treaty, since the Amsterdam Treaty, I have a principle saying that if a state wants to join the EU, that's one of the main elements. It has to share or to respect the EU value. So legally speaking, well, I could say I need it. I need it for that element because if a new member state like to join, well, here we have to define, we have to share the value. And secondly, because if a state doesn't respect our value, I could use maybe Article 7 and try to declare this is in breach of our values, or there is a risk of breach of our value. And so I have a mechanism in some way to suspend the member state. So two elements that are might need a value. Well, so if I keep on going, I say, well, I know why I need value legally speaking. But does value define identity? That's the topic of my lecture normally. So does value are necessary to define identity? Well, you know, I guess I'm clearly older than most of you. I have a child, small one, and I guess some of you might know this one. Did you? Did you look when you were a child on those things and you have to find who? Well, of course, in French, in Spanish, in all the language, he has another name. That's interesting, culturally speaking. But anyway, so he has another name. I have to find it. And of course, the screen is too small, and we don't have time to wait that who found it. So I did it for you. Is there, if you rather prefer. Here it is. Oh, sorry. Yep. Is a girl. I don't remember her name, and is Charlie. So, I mean, in some way, could we say that detail define identity? Because or you identify these two guys because they have something specific to the rest of the group, even very, very tiny, even very, very small, would define identity, would define their external identity. So if I move to the question, do we have an EU identity? We talk about culture today, but do we have that? Well, again, formally, in the treaty, I'm sorry, sometimes I like legal stuff. Formally, if I look in the treaty, well, I don't have a definition. I have only that. I only have a reference in the preamble saying that we are reinforcing the European identity and its independence. It's the only thing I have. So I have no reference to the word identity. So, well, I have to look for a specificity. I have to look for something which might be specific to all of us, or at least to the group of countries belonging to the EU. So, well, what it could be. I'm sure you already you did already talk about those elements, peaceful dispute settlement. Does identity is a synonym of citizenship? An element of EU citizenship? Or, well, or even symbol, the flag, main name, the motto, whatever. So are those elements define our identity? Well, if you look in the treaty, in fact, the term, sorry, I just jumped, I did it too fast. So if I look in the treaty, in fact, the term, where does come from the term value? Identity linked to value. Could we define identity by value? We talk about value, and when I just joined, you were talking about the question of value. Do we have value? And it seems from the present speaker that we have value. We have common value. Okay, well, but it's facts. Again, legally speaking, it's a new concept. If I look in the treaty, well, it comes from the Lisbon Treaty, the word. Inside the treaty, before Lisbon, there was no reference to the word value, where we were using something else that we call principle. Look, here is the text. We call it principle. The Indians found it on the principle of liberty, democracy, respect for human rights, and so on. So the word value was not, but we have principle. Are principles similar to value? It's a question. We don't have time, maybe later, to discuss it, but it's something that I spend a lot of time with my students try to make the difference between principle and value. Well, if I keep on going, well, I have at 2.8 the Lisbon Treaty. And if you look Article 2 of the Lisbon Treaty, defining the EU value, which is very interesting, and again, I will just fly over, but we have two sentences. Did you notice that? We have two sentences in the treaty. The first one saying the Union is founded on the value of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and so on. Second sentence, these values are common to the member state in a society in which pluralism, non-discrimination, tolerance, and so on, and solidarity, equality between women and men prevail. So why we have two sentences? I mean, if we define value, it means that, or you understand that, or you explain the mutation from value from principle to value. Well, again, good look, you're on the time, but I just want to jump to the question. So, well, on sentence once, well, does this essential value compared to the second sentence? And the second sentence is not essential, is something that might complete it. So for sentence 2, there are 3 possibilities. You might say it's new value, add on to the first part. You might say that, or tolerance, non-discrimination, is something in plus. So we have 2 groups of value matching more or less. Or you could even say that, that's too slow, that in fact the first part of the first sentence is linked to the other one. I have equality in the first part, equality between women and men. I have the rule of law, and I have justice. I have freedom and pluralism. In some way, you don't think that equality includes equality between men and women, normally? So why I have 2 sentences? Well, I don't have an answer. Yes, I have, but I leave it to you. So let's keep on going. We might say, well, sorry, you know, the second sentence is not value, it's principle. And again, what means the word principle? Does it, because as long as it defines a society. Well, but I can keep on going for quite long on that, but the question of value, as you know, is not limited to Article 2. The treaty refers to the question of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, saying it has the same legal values in Article 2. Well, it's not, we have the reference to the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights. Again, same value, or same legal value as the Article 2. Well, but why are talking about all those? Because I try to define identity. And my objective was to try to define identity with you because we have common value. But do we have really common value? Article 2, yes, certainly. But when I move to Article 5 and 6, for the Charter and the Conventions, I guess you know about the protocol used by Poland and UK, saying that it doesn't extend to them. So do we have 2 classes of citizens? The one who have access to Article 2, all of them, and for the conventions and for the Charter, I'm sorry, if you're Polish or if you're British citizens, it doesn't apply to you. It doesn't help to define identity as long as that we are different. Well, let's try to be even a little bit more provocative. Let's go to the core. Are values implemented the same way by member states? Do they have the same understanding of the word? And we did it. I mean, with my team, we tried to look into it. And if I take human rights, human dignity, and if I go to one of them, and again, I'm not here to say what is bad and wrong. I just try to analyze it with you. And if I go to the right of life, what does it mean? It's inside the treaty. It's inside the convention. So what about the right to marry and the right to form a family? What does it mean exactly? And lastly, what means equality? Equality between women and men. And we investigated a little bit, and we went to member states' national law to look what does it mean. And when we talk about the right of life, it goes straight to the question of abortion, of course. When does the law start? And if I look in member states, it's very too small for you, I guess, to read it, but we have clearly different understanding. So on something that is, I know, I take it because it'd be controversial, but it's interesting to note that, in fact, women are not equal regarding the right of abortion between member states. And I still have some member states when I have a prohibition. So, okay, you might say, yes, you just pick up the one where it's very controversial, it's a question of ethic and blah, blah, blah. Okay, when does the life end? When you die, sure. When you die, sure. But I mean, could you decide about euthanasia? It's again something which is quite controversial. And living in Belgium, I feel quite comfortable because we have maybe one of the most extensive law regarding that. But if you look again, euthanasia is authorized only in certain member states, Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And we have, it's not prohibited in certain, but again, and there's in some country where it's authorized under certain conditions. Well, again, so you might say, yes, but the right of life, that's too sensitive. What about marriage? I guess you see me coming. Well, I mean, right to marry and to form a family. What is a family? What is a marriage? What about marriage between women and marriage between men? I mean, gay and lesbian. Do we consider it equal? And if you did follow what was occurring in France in the last few months, it was quite amazing from Belgian point of view, because we find it quite funny that they still fight on that, and we are still talking about the possibility for euthanasia for minors. But anyway, so if I look to consider gay and lesbian as equal to, I will say, normal, within bracket, marriage, I have only a few member states where it's fully authorized. And of course, I have some possibilities, what we call it, for, as a lawyer, we like that, as a contractual relationship between two persons. As a question of marriage, I mean, the question of equality between men and women regarding that, well, doesn't seem to be completely equal. And again, here is a list. If you're interested, you have all the possibilities to identify the difference. Lastly, well, marriage sometimes ends badly. I would like to divorce. Are we equal in front of the question of divorce in the EU? I mean, especially now with our Erasmus program and all those things, we get a lot of couples coming from different member states. Are they equal regarding that? Again, divorce. So divorce, what we call it, only for consent, by consent between the two, is only available in a few member states. So again, I could move to the question of gender non-discriminations. Of course, the approach is rather different between member states. So well, let's move to the last one. Well, we have had a very lengthy discussion during the convention in 2004 about the question of the reference to God in the treaty. Do we have a reference to God in the treaty? You say no, we say yes. I mean, it was something very controversial. And again, you might understand why, because if you reference to God, you might reference to religions, meaning there is some law who are upper than the law adopted by man, and then we move again to the question of abortion and so on. Okay? So do we have that? Well, we find a compromise. Here it is. No, you don't have it yet. We have it. But it's inside the preambula. And the preambula, look, drawing inspiration from the cultural, religious, and humanist inheritance of Europe. What is interesting when you look at that we have religions and not God, and we balance it, the question of religions, the Christian, Muslim, Jews, and humanists, in the same sentence, and the question of cultural included. So, as I say, I'd like to conclude, but I'm really too long. But, well, to conclude, EU identity, and I heard the word quite a few times, even if I was there just for a few minutes, diversity. Well, I love that, certainly, and we have the motto, united in diversity. Well, EU supports difference, that's great. Could we really build identity on that? Question mark. That's a question. I would love to, but diversity, as I said earlier, how you define identity, because you have something in common that you refer to. Does diversity, by principle, agree on the principle of difference, help you to identify the group? I'm afraid I'm not fully convinced. And so, well, could a framework identity to be identified by a country, could it support the promotion of value externally? I don't know. I don't know, but maybe the main problem is that one. Most of my students are between 19 and 26. And when they talk about Europe, they say, of course, the good news is that in Belgium, voting is mandatory, compulsory, so they have to go to vote. But they don't care, even in EU studies. And the question is maybe going further than identity, and let me conclude by that. And maybe the main issue, and we already touched, some of the previous speakers touched about it, is, well, what is the aim? What's the objective of the EU? We just talked about the question of food, the question of constituting reserves, the common agricultural policies. We know that it was one of the core of the EU, the question of peace. But peace for you, it's something that, imagine that it might be a conflict between Belgium and Germany tomorrow. Who even thought about that? So, of course, the EU succeed on that. The EU succeed on on peace, partly succeed on economy, free movement. So maybe the problem we have now is to find a common goal. To find a common goal for the next generation, saying, what are we pursuing? And I just stop on that. And I say, I'm already too long. Thanks for your time.